In their talks last week, US Presidents Donald Trump and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker reached a deal to avoid a full-blown US-EU trade war. Trump also withdrew his threats to impose tariffs on European cars, while the EU promised to import more liquefied natural gas and soybeans from the US. However, many have doubts about whether or not the deal will have any substantial impact. Jacqueline Varas, an expert on trade policy, said, "It's important to remember that they just agreed to keep talking. No tariff has been lowered yet, no non-tariff affair has been lowered yet, and no real change has been made." In the deal, the EU did promise to import more soybeans from the US. However, its stringent regulations on genetically modified foods remain an obstacle for US products. And Juncker, head of the European Commission, has limited influence over the amount of soybean imports, as this mainly depends on the private sector. Although it seems that the US is seeking to replace China's soybean markets with that of Europe, EU countries just don't have that much of an appetite for the product. According to a Bloomberg report, the promise President Trump received from the EU won't make much of a difference to the potential losses of US farmers from a trade war with China. The EU is the second biggest market for US oilseed. However, China used to import much more. Last year, the EU imported 3.6 million metric tons of US soybeans, while China imported 32 million metric tons. And some Americans have taken to Twitter to express their thoughts. One of the arguments points out that even if the European Union raises its imports remarkably, they will still find it hard to import as much as China once did. In 2016 and 2017, China took approximately 60% of all US soybean exports and 30% of the total crop. Meanwhile, others called the EU-US deal a nightmare for farmers. Over 3 million farmers in the United States could be affected by Trump's measures, and they cannot risk losing the Chinese market that they've been working hard on for decades. The negative effects of Trump's trade policies are now becoming clear, and more people are seeing that US tariffs on other countries are not benefiting the US. What Americans need is good trading relations and stability.